Welcome to the Commercial Real Estate Podcast powered by First National. My name is Aaron Cameron, of course, with me, as always, Adam Pwadek, recording today live at the Southwestern Ontario Real Estate Forum. Our guest today is a gentleman by the name of Tim Kennedy, who is the principal of Lowland Properties. Tim, thanks for joining.
Thanks for having me, guys.
So, got to do it. I've known Tim as long as I've been working in the industry, basically. I was just saying off air before we got it, I spent more time planning this podcast than I've planned any other podcast, simply because usually I don't do any planning, and which is part of the fun for the regular listeners. You know,
we hope.
Yeah. I'm going to pretend because it's easier if I don't do any planning. We kind of there's no contrived interviews, right? We really literally sit down and start asking questions because we think that's that gets the best product out to our listeners. When you know somebody's background as intimately as I do, it's really hard for me to go, so tell me about the time that you did this, and I know all the stories. So I'm going to try really hard to just not lead Tim into too many of the stories and take him in the direction maybe he doesn't want me to go, because I know all the skeletons and all that.
You can go anywhere.
Okay,
I've got nothing to hide.
Your first leading question would be, what's your best employer? Because, of course, we all three of us worked at First National for a number of years. We'll save it for Tim's story, but there's a lot of leading questions you could throw in here.
That's the idea, right? So can't be contrived. So, Tim, you have listened, I know, or at least you've told us that you have, whether you actually have or not. But tell us about yourself. How did you get into real estate at the beginning?
Yeah, so, I was one of these people who had a parent in real estate. My father was in commercial real estate for quite some time, and so you hear these stories all the time. We'd be going on family road trips, and let's say we're going to Montreal or Vermont. We went to Vermont a few times in my childhood. On the way, you'd stop at 4 or 5 shopping centers and do site visits, and so it just sort of became sort of ingrained in who I was without me even knowing it. And through university, I did a number of summer jobs at real estate companies, mainly property management. And then the last summer, I went to Ashler Urban Realty, which is a brokerage which does not exist anymore. It was bought by Cushman & Wakefield a number of years ago. My last summer job was at Ashler Urban Realty, and I did not want to be a broker in my own mind in my final year of university. However, I thoroughly enjoyed my time at Ashler. The people were fantastic, a group that just really wanted to see everyone succeed as human beings and employees, and it sort of put their employees
How did you find
first.
Ashler? Because I mean, again, trying not to lead you, but knowing you, it was a great fit, right? Because it really was this sort of small shop, we can do anything type of environment. And
Sure.
You didn't know that when you got there,
Sure.
right?
I mean, you knew nothing about brokerage. I did not have any real understanding about what they did other than sort of advertise space.
Because it makes sense. You find guys like Adam join Colliers. Well, of course, because it's easy.
I actually
to
interviewed
find
at Ashler. I went 5 interviews deep, did not get the job offer.
Guess who did?
Yeah.
Sorry.
That probably was it.
Sorry.
Yeah. Was this 2009 or so?
Well, no, I have a couple of years after, so that's someone else.
Okay.
I apologize. I apologize on behalf of them. But I was very fortunate, as mentioned. My father was in real estate. That being said, he was fairly old school. So what he would do is he would give me a list of names and companies that he thought were good people and good companies. This is when I was a university student, to find summer jobs. And he said, you can either work retail, which I did for a long time, and I did throughout university and in high school, or you can call these people and you can try and get a summer job. And
But I'm not calling them for you.
correct. and don't drop my name. However, if they ask, you're not going to lie, and you can say it then. But so I would do that every summer. And Craig Smith and Ashler was one of those names, and Craig knew right away because he's just got a good sort of mind for that. So he's like, oh, you're Bill Kennedy's son, and yeah, come for an interview, and ended up getting a summer job. Did that for a number of months, and like I said, just really, really liked the people. But I went, man, these people are crazy. I could not do what they're doing every single day. It takes a lot of dedication, a lot of risk with your time, and there's no guarantee for reward. I was also doing an urban planning degree, so I saw myself in development more than anything else at the time. This was 2011, or I guess 2010 at the time, and we hadn't completely come out of, I wouldn't call it a recession, but that downturn, and jobs were still few and far between, especially at the larger companies. So I ended up sort of applying everywhere, and Greg knows this because he helped me. And then after sort of 3 or 4 months, I went, what am I doing? Here's a group of people that want to see me succeed. I'll learn a lot, and even if I don't love the brokerage side of it, do a year of it, 2 years of it, and I'll go somewhere else if I have to. And that was my mindset. Got my license the second half of that school year, and then I started at Ashler after basically begging Greg for 2.5 months, and started there. Fast forward 5 years, I absolutely loved every moment being there. I loved being a broker. It was incredibly hard to leave, but I wanted to round myself out, and just to take a step back, it was an incredibly entrepreneurial group, and I think the industry is pretty entrepreneurial, and you guys get that, and First National, we'll get onto that, but that's sort of a very similar culture.
Because Ashler was predominantly GTA or exclusively GTA. It was small.
Or even
downtown,
yeah.
It was pretty much downtown west, downtown east. You think of the Allied portfolio, some exceptions of that. If we did a lot of work for Slate office when they owned a bunch of the stuff that Dream now has on Bay Street. That's really what it was. It was class, B and class C.
It's a very niche,
office,
very
niche.
very small. I mean, and competing in a world where there's really just 4 major players, really, right? So,
totally. And
you could probably almost walk to most of your listings from your office.
I did. I did not own a car. I walked everywhere or took transit. Sometimes, near the end of my tenure there, we had some stuff in the junction as that was starting to go. But it was very.
So before we go to your next step, at what point were you thinking about like the end game or the first, like, did you always have like a 5, 10, 15 year plan? I mean, we all kind of think about it, but
yeah.
I'll tell you right now, I have no idea what I'm going to do next year. But I think back then you had a sense of where you wanted to go ultimately.
Yeah. I think it was the atmosphere. 2 things. One, even though my father had some institutional experiences, he was also an entrepreneur for many years in real estate. So that always appealed to me. However, at Ashler, everyone was very entrepreneurial, and everyone sort of talked about what else they could do, whether it was in real estate or otherwise. They were always thinking about sort of how to scratch that itch. And so, it was a very open environment, and sort of what you want to be and who you want to be and all that type of good stuff. So I think immediately I was thinking about how can I be better, how can I understand more, and I found, there's 95% of brokerage was extremely rewarding. 5% was there's certain areas that are just black holes a little bit to brokers because you only have so much time in your day. Understanding really how a building is managed and operated outside of the leasing. Finance was a huge black hole. You understood generally what was going on, but
need capital to make capital, but yeah,
that's about it. So you're trying to underwrite deals and put together sims and all that stuff and sell the product. But really, you're calling a mortgage broker or you're calling a banker and you're telling them, well, what would you do with this? And then you're slapping that on, at Ashler at least, because we weren't CBRE. We didn't have a giant capital markets team and stuff like that. So there were the black holes that always sort of ate away at me. And I think more than anything, that sort of propelled me into making a move and just wanting to round myself out. So no matter what it was, whether it was, working for an owner or working for myself or whatever, I had a better skill set to prepare me for that.
So you ended up at First National.
Yeah, well, I pretty much have you to thank for that. You bugged me for a while, and the opportunity was pretty clear, I think. First National, again, you go from a, let's call it 30-person company at Ashler to a 1,000-person company at First National. However, for those that don't know, and this isn't a plug for First National, but the commercial,
go on.
the commercial team is very, very close, very entrepreneurial, and it feels very much like a very small company, and that is a hard thing to do, and kudos to Maury and Stephen and Jeremy and really everyone involved for creating that, because that's challenging. But I didn't appreciate that at the time. I think you both sort of spoke about that as a reality, but I assumed that it would be quite different from my experience. But in terms of the entrepreneurial sort of bend that FN had, right away it was, hey Tim, come in. You lean on your relationships. Go continue to foster those relationships. We'll back you with sort of underwriting support. You can learn the finance, and I'm glad now. My clients didn't know at the time, but you can learn this whole industry on the fly, and just do what you do, and we'll get there together. What an incredible opportunity that was for me, and I still feel so fortunate.
So when did you start? And I mean, I think I know the answer, but when did you start thinking about Lowland, or the idea of Lowland?
Yeah,
because there was one more stop along the way, I think, in between Lowland and First National.
Yeah, there was
right?
a cup of coffee in between.
Yeah.
And I would say at some point, and I don't think this is taboo. It's pretty common these days. At some point, probably about a year and a half before I left First National, I was at the time, I would have been married. My wife is from Kitchener-Waterloo. And so I was here back and forth, and real estate junkie and me, you just start looking at real estate, and you call the brokers and say, well, what are you selling that for? And, what rents, and you just start putting together the pieces. So I knew there was something in, Waterloo region. I thought there was a very good risk-reward play here relative to the GTA, which is all I really knew for many years. So I started to put together the pieces there. A very small building on King Street, which is the main drag in Kitchener, came for sale. It was about $1 million, and I thought there was a very clear play on how to turn it around. It was in awful condition, but well located, lots of potential for a sort of an Allied-esque brick and beam building. With a small twist that we sort of like to put on those buildings, but we thought there was a play there. Ended up doing that basically, essentially family and friends, and really as a side investment, just like, hey, there's this thing we want to put some money into. Let's go. So that's sort of,
for the record, at First National, that's perfectly acceptable.
I
was wondering it. It's lots of it's encouraged. Again, that's the entrepreneurial spirit. Like it's
and at the time it was not. It was like, hey, this would be great if this was something, 10, 15 years down the road, and this was the start of something. But I don't think it was, we're going to ramp this up to, be, what we are now, which is, not huge, but 13 buildings in a couple of years. And we're going to be off to the races after this one. It was just, this is a good play. Makes sense. Let's do it. And so that's sort of when it started. And then, nice thing about being a smaller market is you do something and someone catches wind and they go, hey, what's going on there? Who are you? And that whole, then other opportunities arise. So over the next, I guess, year and a half, 2 years, First National and my cup of coffee elsewhere, we acquired another couple buildings, and that was really.
So the cup of coffee, and we can skip it quickly, but it kind of forced your hand a little bit to a good in a positive way. It's kind of funny the way things worked out. Like you had kind of thought, here's another way for me to you'd done brokerage, you'd done lending. There's another sort of a consultation opportunity to kind of really hone your skills in that format, and it kind of ended abruptly. But it was like, here, this is your opportunity now. Go
totally.
Right?
And this is one of these things that life happens, and the pandemic happened, and I was not alone, and lots of people sort of had their world sort of turned upside down a little bit. But I think the important part about anything in life, whether it's your career or your personal life. When something that seems to be negative happens in your life, it's all about how you react, and not about what just happened. And and Scott Galloway, I listen to his podcast, and he always talks about, he gets engineers that call him from Google or wherever, and they just got laid off, and they're going, what do I do? And he goes, well, listen, you worked at one of the biggest and best and hardest companies to get a job for many years. You got laid off. Guess what? You'll get another job. There's probably 400 companies that want you right now. So don't mourn for a couple days, but move on and create something positive out of this. So
wait, is First National the Google in this analogy?
Yeah,
I'm not sure if
let's
I'm
move on. Let's
following.
assume it is. Yes, it is.
Yeah.
Sure.
So exactly. And so but again, I think I'd worked for 3 great companies. Ashler, First National, and anyone that checks my LinkedIn can see the other one is KPMG, and so I think what I was able to do, and really thankfully from my business partners, but also our investor partners, I got calls and just said, hey, Tim, guess what? This is an opportunity. Let's go. Instead of being, oh my gosh, there's a pandemic going on, let's all sit on our hands and go get another job because whatever. I got a bunch of calls from both some people who were our first investors, and then some who have now been big investors of other deals that we've done since. Say, yeah, this is an opportunity. This is a moment. If you want to take this, we got your back.
So you make the decision, and I think there's a lot of us in the real estate community that I think dream of doing what you're doing, right? It's kind of, finding a whole bunch of capital and taking the reins, starting your own business. I mean, you're principal, but co-founder, you're the person that's in control. There must have been a moment, right? You got a wife, you got a kid, young child, and all of a sudden you made this decision. There's no First National blanket. There's no Ashler Urban blanket. There's no Craig Smith or Maury Tawes. Like, it's just you. What was the first month or two like? Because it must have been like
in a pandemic.
Yeah. Oh, by the way,
Well, So no childcare. My wife works for Canadian Tire Corporate, and so she's working full time, and she had actually just come off mat leave when this all happened. So we're trying to watch our 1-year-old. I'm effectively trying to start a business and not allowed to leave my condo. And so, it was wild, but there's some adrenaline for the first few months. I think there's some excitement, and obviously, I was fortunate enough to do well enough that I before to put some savings together. But I tell you, savings doesn't last forever.
You
right?
gotta make moves.
Yeah,
and
moves,
yeah.
And at this point, was it still just the one property that you acquired prior to COVID?
So it was, we were 3 small properties, and right around this time we actually had, it was also decent timing, and this was not enough to pay the bills by any stretch, but we had actually just acquired 2 more properties, and one which is sort of a game changer for us. One was an office building that we've done well on, and still a bright future for that one, even with COVID. Tough timing, but we bought it really well. The other one was, every other deal we had bought from that point was like, let's call it $800,000 to $2.5 million, like small deals. And then all office and retail. And then we closed on one deal that was $9.6 million, and it was a 115,000 square foot industrial building. And we only bought it because it was dropped 3 times, and the price just kept on getting reduced and reduced and reduced. $87 a foot. Rents were way below market. It was very attractive, and people were sort of nervous about environmental or the tenant role, but no one was actually going to spend the money to do the homework. And so anyways, we convinced our partners to take a bet on us to do industrial. The market was not what we know the market is today. It was still very much like, industrial's a decent asset class, and it'll be pretty steady. But it was not.
Yeah,
that all happened over the next year, and now.
Yeah, what do you think the per square foot value is today on that one?
We'd have to ask an appraiser.
A lot more.
Yeah,
a lot more.
No.
I'm sensitive to timing, Tim. So I want to get to Lowland Properties, who you are now, what's going on. So maybe just you made that jump. That acquisition, I think, really kind of helped. I think it probably was a confidence thing, if more than anything else. Like, okay, wait a minute. Like, here I am now. I got my fourth property. This property is worth 5 times more than the other 3 at that point, or whatever the calculation is. And now you're off and running. Move to Kitchener. You're open up an office. Maybe just describe kind of what Lowland is now. And I'm really curious about what the next 5 years look like, and how now you're really embracing, the sort of the operator, owner, manager of this business.
Sure, I'll be quick with the now. Now we've really pivoted towards industrial and other things. We're opportunistic, so we'll sort of do whatever we think. Wherever there's an opportunity, we'll invest in. We got four people that work for us, which it's not a lot, but it's
4 times more than you had.
4 times, yeah. So that's pretty great. We got just a stone's throw away from where we're sitting right now. Our office is. We have 13 buildings approaching 500,000 square feet under ownership and management. So that's where we've come. So and it's probably about $85 billion under management. So
it's all through GPLPs.
It's all through, yeah.
So not fundraising.
No, it's all sort of private, high net worth partners.
And that's the intention going forward.
Yeah, you get a long-term vision. You get partners that you can. The LP model is tougher to raise. I think it's tougher to raise capital in a way, or maybe it's harder to execute on deals because you don't know necessarily if you have the money until you have the deal and you start pitching it. So your due diligence period is really shrunk because of it. But what you can do is you can align that capital with every deal, and if everyone has their glasses on and their eyes wide open, then really no matter what happens in that deal, you should have everyone rowing in the same direction. So that's the nice part about the LP model, we think. And we're long-term, forever type owners. That's our mindset, unless something
really
too
good
good.
opportunity,
Yeah.
You mentioned with your first acquisition, there's a bit of a twist in your investment thesis. What's the twist?
Well, I think with Brick and Beam, I spent a lot of years, and this is not a knock because they've obviously done unbelievably well. I spent a lot of years leasing product on behalf of Allied and selling product on behalf of Allied. And what we found is Brick and Beam, it looks really beautiful, and people love sort of stepping into the space. But no, it doesn't suit everyone long term because the creaky floors and the heels and all that stuff, and it's very, very cool space, and some people will stay there for many, many years. But we also saw a number of people that went, yeah, this is really great, but I'd rather have a little bit more quiet or
corporate.
Yeah. And so they want the feel, but they want the look and the feel, but they sort of want the function of your typical office building. So that's what we tried to do there is, we poured 2 inches of concrete on the floors and reinforced, the floors so that you get great noise insulation. You wouldn't get the same sort of creaking of the floors. We exposed a bunch of the bricks, so you still get that. Drywall ceilings, that wasn't necessarily by choice. It was a building code thing. But so you go in our buildings, our Brick and Beam buildings, and they're quite modernized, and they function like a almost like a brand new building, but there's a lot of elements of character in it. So it costs a little bit more money to get it there, but we think the product just is a little bit more durable.
It probably makes it more broader scope of tenant base, right?
Yeah, you're not leaning just on the tech all the time. Yeah.
So only commercial, industrial, office, and retail when it's part there?
Yes, generally we have 6 townhomes that we're building. We're going to take to market very soon. Actually, we just
the sale market or the rental market?
Sale, yeah. And so that's a whole other podcast, about my philosophy on all the rental stuff. But yeah, it is for sale. We're dipping our toe. It was one of those things that it was a commercial building. was a little bit overpriced on a per foot of the tiny little building, but the land just made total sense as residential. No one was snapping it up. So we bought it, and we thought it was an opportunity, and it's a way for us to dip our toe in the water and learn that business. I don't know if we're going to be building, 200 homes a year in 5 years or not. I doubt it, but I think there will be some market housing in our future.
Okay. And all KW? Only KW.
For now, it's KW. That is not something that we are steadfast on. We just love the region. We think there's a huge runway here.
So now you have a car for your business.
Yes,
geography's a little broader.
Yes, yeah, that's true. You drive everywhere, but everything is still 15 minutes away somehow. So, yeah, it's the focus. But we've looked elsewhere. We've almost bought elsewhere. We have the support to go elsewhere, but right now we do see a big runway here.
And why was elsewhere, and why didn't it make sense?
Honestly, vendor expectations changed.
Okay, so it wasn't market specific.
It wasn't market specific. It was like, hey, you hit this price. Okay, we're gonna hit that price. Well, now my price is this, and and it's 2x what I thought it was before. And those sort of stories. So we've been close a couple times, but again, even if we purchased elsewhere, I think for the foreseeable future, our vast majority of acquisitions would be here.
And you're now living here. You are you're raising a family here. What's the attraction? What do you like about Kitchener? I mean, you're downtown Toronto boy originally.
Yeah.
And you're kind of a supplanted here now.
Well, you both know, like, things change, and the restaurants and the culture and all that stuff. And again, it's not a knock for Waterloo region. Toronto is just so much bigger. There's so much more of that there. But at the end of the day, when you have a 4-year-old, you don't get a lot of time, or you have multiple, little ones. You don't get a lot of time to experience all that as an adult. So, the drop-off wasn't too bad for myself. As mentioned, my wife's from here, so it was pretty easy. Her family's here, so that was nice for her. And you really see my son, he loves it. And, he's able to do 8 weeks of swimming lessons for $67 and, soccer for a whole month for $80. And, there's all these activities, and there's all this space, and there's not a lot of wait lists. And so, from a family perspective, it actually worked really nicely because, one, it's good. It's better for me to be here to watch over all this and be hands-on. I know our investor partners like it. But from a family perspective, it's been easy as well.
Well, Aaron's got 2 young children and a third on the way, so he's intently listening to what you're saying here and doing the math in his head.
Yeah, yeah. I can ask my neighbor.
I went to school here, so I love this. I love this place, and I won't say that I could not move here, but I'm glad you did.
Aaron and I were having a discussion yesterday because we did touch on it briefly at the start of this podcast. We are at the Southwest Ontario conference, and we were talking about where else in the country of Canada, national view, where else you would put a conference in call it a non-major city market, and this is the obvious one. So, there's a reason we're here. This is the first conference for a reason. You're in a hotbed of activity outside of Toronto proper. So your investment thesis is probably reinforced by seeing things like this conference taking off here.
Totally. And the funny thing, and some people sort of go, well, I don't know about this, but you look at every Colliers, CBRE, JLL, Avison, every major real estate brokerage in Canada. If you look, 7 years ago, 8 years ago, compared to now, if you look at all their research reports, every single one of them, whereas before 8 years ago, it would just be the major Canadian cities that we all know. And now on every single one of those reports, Kitchener-Waterloo. And it's just little things like that where it sort of reinforces, everyone's watching. It might not be everyone's number 1, 2, might not be everyone's 7th choice of investment in the country, but everyone is watching now, and that is meaningful. And if you walk around, I'm sure, from when you went to school to now, you walk around the city, the amount of towers that are going up.
It's wild. The Google investment, I mean, there's a lot of positive attributes here that it just, it didn't exist 5 years ago, and that's when you kind of moved here, right? So it's
it's
exciting. And the trajectory continues. I mean, the trend line seems to be really positive for the foreseeable future.
Totally. And even in the downtowns, which I know are struggling everywhere, like you just look at the population. I think within 2 kilometers of our 3 buildings on King Street, within a 2-kilometer radius, I think in the next 5 years, there's going to be 7,000 units that are built. Those are comparable numbers to some of the condo booms in, like the King West neighborhoods and stuff
And
like
they've
that.
invested in public transportation. There's a lot of really strong, and don't forget the university students that just keep flowing through every year,
the
right?
talent is huge. And that's just a note for everyone in Canada, I think, to pay attention to. Everywhere around the world, like you go to Germany, you go to San Francisco, you go anywhere where there's sort of tech, everyone knows University of Waterloo. It's a big deal outside of Canada. And I think in Canada, people are like, yeah, it's the University of Waterloo. And I think we know a little bit more now, but it's a much more relaxed reaction to the University of Waterloo in Canada as opposed to elsewhere in the world. People consider this one of the hotbeds for tech talent for sure.
All right, Tim, I think we're out of time today. I look forward to having you back on in 5 years so we can see if the 5-year vision crystallized the way that you thought it would. But I guess you're nothing if not adaptable. We want to thank, of course, the Real Estate Forums for hosting us here today.
He'll be in hospitality by then.
Yeah.
I own every hotel in Kitchener. Anyway, sorry, keep going.
I'll repeat. We want to thank the Real Estate Forums for having us here today at the Southwest Ontario Real Estate Forum and First National, of course, for powering the podcast. But Tim, it's been great to catch up. Obviously, Tim and I had work history together at First National, and I knew him prior to that in his Ashler Urban days. So it's fun to catch up over a podcast.
Thank you guys. Had a lot of fun.
Good luck.